from Family Service Association.
Good morning.
Morning.
How are you?
Good.
Our program is a little bit unique in that we've actually gone through sort of a rebranding in the past year, because we've ended up, due to the feedback that we've gotten over the years from the companies that we work with, and it's not a large number. We have about a dozen contracts, but those that are with us are very loyal and have been with us for a lot of years. But we've specialized our menu based on the feedback that we've gotten from them over the years. So it kind of falls outside of the traditional model of an employee assistance program. It has some of the components that you find common to all, but a few things that we have developed specialties in. So we've changed it, and the rebranding is, we call it now the Employer Support Program, or ESP. So we're all getting used to that. And I've got sort of a handout here that describes what the major components of it are. But I would first ask, other than Barbara, whom I know has been involved with us for many, many years, and I know the town of Fairhaven is looking at an employee assistance program right now. I had a conversation with Jeffrey Osage about that, and we've expressed an interest in working with the town of Fairhaven. How many of you have been associated either now or in the past with organizations that have had an employee assistance program in them? Okay, that's most of you. So then I'll give the short version of, when I explain to people what the philosophy behind it is. The great comparison I think that works best is to talk about the copy machine in the office. If the copy machine breaks down, what do? Well, we need the copy machine. We probably have a service contract with the company that sold it to us or is leasing it to us, and we call a guy. I got a guy, and a guy comes in and he fixes the copy machine. Why? Because the office can't function without a properly working copy machine. You can insert, computer network or server or whatever. Something technological that breaks down, we need to have it to function. But if an employee has an issue that is impeding their ability to work productively, too often companies will say, well, that's their issue. We can't get involved in that. We don't want to pry into their business. If they're going through a grief and loss issue, if they're dealing with depression, if they have a child who is failing in school and they can't figure out the reasons why, and phone calls from home, or if they have an elderly parent whose needs have increased over the years. And as a result, there's a lot of perhaps distraction in the workplace and a loss of productivity on the part of that employee. We tend to look the other way when that occurs, when really the most, I think, forward-thinking companies and organizations are those that say, we need to put in place some sort of safety net so that our employees can have a place to go if those issues arise. And so that's why for us at Family Service, it was a good fit for us in 1980, having counseling as sort of a central component to the services that we provide. They've since diversified greatly, but we are a licensed outpatient behavioral health center, and so we have staff psychiatrists, nurse practitioners, licensed clinical social workers who do therapy with people in the community. And what we do through our contracts for employee assistance is to sort of fast track those who, as best we can, to try to see them as quickly as we can. I will tell you, and if you don't know this, please take it from me, all providers of outpatient...
Sorry, I'm not sure what you said.
Sorry. Sorry, Mike.
Siri wants you to repeat.
Siri wants to repeat.
Let me start at the beginning. Those organizations, whether they be single providers who hang a shingle outside their practice, or whether it's groups of people in a clinical setting that provide outpatient behavioral health treatment, the demand for the service is extraordinary, and the waiting lists are huge. What we try to do for our ESP referrals is and we've got a really outstanding intake department, which consists of one person who does nothing all day long but schedule appointments with people who call. So she's good at shaking the bushes to find out if there are cancellations, if there are cases that are termed, so that she stays in touch with our clinical staff to make sure that if there are even late-breaking appointment opportunities, that we take advantage of that and try to see people as quickly as possible. We feel we owe it to the organizations that contract with us to be as responsive as possible.
But do you come on site? Or I would think it's a confidentiality issue, so does the employee then go to FSA?
Yeah, they generally do.
Okay.
And it's been we've learned that that's kind of how they want it to be. It does help with anonymity. Although, as a general practice, we do see people in their homes. We do see people, and we have a number of our clinical services where we're actually, seeing people in their homes, where there's a hardship and transportation issue, although we have other ways to address that as well. So the counseling component is but one, and it's probably the part of our program that is most utilized by most of our participating companies. One of the other things that we also offer is staff development training, which some companies take greater advantage of than others. There's 2 or 3 organizations that I work with that schedule me for 5 or 6 trainings a year. Some of them they want to do, for example, sexual harassment prevention. And I'll leave everyone a list of those that we happen to offer at the time. We've also customized that list based on the feedback we've gotten over the years as to what people need. And some of the things from, we'll call it the more routine menu: stress management, time management, conflict resolution, communication. If there is a particular clinical need, we'll bring in some of our clinical staff to provide that. But generally speaking, it's the usual menu of training that people look to an organization like us to do. There are some of our participating organizations that don't utilize our training at all, or they do it very, very on a very limited basis, because the nature, first of all, they may have an internal training component within their organization that handles a lot of this, and they really don't need us for that. Or the training that they do, knowing that people's time is very precious, might have to do with some regulatory or legal requirement based on the business that they're in. So counseling is one component. The staff development training is a second component. The third component of our program is loosely defined as consultation. There are times when I will get a phone call from someone, often in the human resource department. They're my primary contacts, although the smaller companies, I'll deal with the company executive or CEO. And they'll say, I've got an employee that's having an issue, and there may not be a counseling need necessarily, but they're looking for ways to provide some support and some advocacy for that individual. And we kind of work behind the scenes, sort of quietly under the radar, to provide that kind of consultation. There have been a number of times over the years when I've been called in, for example, to go to the worksite and meet with employees who are having some kind of a conflict. It's literally happened, I would say, 12 times over the years with me, where someone has said this kind of a scenario. I've got 2 people who work for me. I need them. They're valuable employees. They're not getting along. And I need somebody who's an impartial third party to sit and debrief them and talk about what's going on individually and then together to try to come to some resolution of that conflict. Obviously, I don't have the authority from a human resource or management perspective to impose any kind of discipline, other than to just kind of let them vent a little bit. And very often we find that they've got more in common than they have differences, and we try to resolve that. We've done it with individual employees. We've done it with groups of employees. At a manufacturing company a number of years ago that said, like the 2 divisions that are at each other's throats all day long. Each one consists of 4 people. I want to put them in a room and I want them to talk it out, and I want to do it away from the workplace. Well, we had them come to our place, and we sat in a conference room like this, and I sort of mediated the discussion, and we came to some resolution on how they might better get along. But most of the consultation calls that we get are sort of routine matters, asking how to handle a particular situation. And the 4th component of our program, and the final component, is the one that we want to use the least, because it is, the fancy name is critical incident stress debriefing. We get called in on occasions when there is some sort of critical incident that occurs in the workplace that can be usually some sort of acute event that's going to cause a great deal of employee stress.
If I can interrupt,
Yes.
I had to call Mike, it was 4 years ago. 4 years ago in December, we had the death, a sudden, very, very sudden death of an employee. She was 36 years old, physically fit. She had organized bike challenges. If you saw this person, knew this person, you would never, ever, ever expect that she would have had a massive heart attack. She was on her treadmill that morning, and she wasn't feeling well. She took a shower, she collapsed, and we got news. Well, she was rushed to the hospital. Within hours, she was dead. And it was just shocking to the whole organization. She was very well liked. She was very involved in the organization.
And involved in the community
And
as well.
involved in the
Sort of
community.
representing the bank
Yes.
in a lot of community events.
Very, very well-rounded, very well-thought of, well-respected person. And it was just shocking to our employees. She was very close to a lot of employees. She had developed a lot of relationships throughout the community. It just hit everybody really, really hard. Nobody could imagine that if anybody, this would have happened to her. And I called Mike, and Mike came that day, that afternoon, and we just opened it up to anybody who wanted to come and meet, sit down. We had a group meeting. Even our CEO came and attended those sessions. He was very, very upset by it. So that was, when you talk about the critical incident, I can certainly vouch for what family service can offer. So.
Thank you, Barbara. And what Barbara's leaving out is one of the more routine conversations that we have, unfortunately, when her organization calls upon us to deliver that service, is bank robberies.
Yes. Mike has been to quite a few. We've been to a few.
To the point where when I see Barbara Tripp on the caller ID,
Guess what?
Look in the newspaper.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate seeing her today outside the setting of some disastrous occurrence. But think about it. And we work with a combination of two banks and one credit union. Think about it. You're a young person. Demographically, the profile is usually a young woman. Comes to work, spending the day, expecting to spend the day with their second family, their co-workers. And over the routine course of their day, at some point, somebody walks in and robs them, sometimes at gunpoint. Think of the dynamic of that. Think of the impact of that on the individuals who are immediately affected. They never expected to be in that kind of a circumstance. They go home after the event and they tell the family what occurred, and the family is telling them things like, you don't need that job. It's too dangerous. Don't go there. Their minds are racing, thinking of what if that individual, are they going to catch that individual? If not, is he going to come back? Am I going to see him in Walmart? What is the impact for that individual on various quality of life issues? To sort of tie it in with wellness, and to you folks, the connection is an obvious one. What are their sleeping habits going to be over the course of the next days or weeks? What is their appetite changes? What are their appetite changes going to be, if any? What is their cognitive ability going to be in terms of their preoccupation with the images of what they experienced in what is otherwise their second home? It's traumatic. And what we do is we convene a meeting, and Barbara will tell you the first call is to the police, second call is to me. So that we can take those people immediately after the event, after they've been interviewed by the police, after fingerprints have been taken off the counter. You've seen it all, photographs, major crimes detectives reviewing the videotape to see if they can get some good pictures of the person who committed that crime. And then we sit with the staff in a room like this and we debrief them on what they just experienced. To try to, because we're not going to take away their fear, we're not going to take away the symptoms that they will experience over the course of the next days or weeks, but we can prepare them for it. We can talk to them about what they might experience, and basically tell them, This is normal to happen. If you're fearful, if you have a sleepless night tonight, don't think you're crazy. Don't think everyone else in the organization is doing well and I'm not. Sometimes people suffer alone very much when they've been the victims of a traumatic experience such as that. So that's become for us rather a specialty. And where that had its origins is in the work that we started 30 years ago with the Fall River Police Department. When our agency president at the time, who has since retired, came to the conclusion that, you know what, being a police officer is a stressful job. Police officers see and do a lot of things that none of us want to do. What avenues do they have to deal with that? And we determined there were very few. The demographic profile of police officers is kind of interesting, and I was brought in about 12 years ago to start facilitating our police group because it has an additional component. In addition to doing a critical incident debriefing with officers, our contract with the Fall River Police Department is unique in that we have a group of volunteer officers who train on a weekly basis to be peer support officers to other police officers. So if they hear a guy's going through a divorce, a guy is drinking too much, one of their colleagues seems out of sorts, they may be exhibiting some symptoms of depression, we work with our volunteer officers to get them to identify those kinds of things and to talk to them under the radar, outside of any kind of a clinical setting, and just provide that peer support. An incident where a child is injured or killed, there's a terrible accident where people are dismembered, and the visuals that are associated with that are very, very upsetting. We've worked very hard over the years to establish a set of criteria where certain incidents would qualify and officers would be mandated to come for critical incident debriefing. The model that we use is very similar to the one we use if there's a robbery at a bank. The techniques are pretty much the same, but the circumstances quite obviously are different. And think about it. Police officers go home after a day's work and their families say to them, "How was your day?" And they go, "Fine." They don't talk about what they've experienced. They don't want to upset their family. They don't want to expose their family members to the dangers that they may be dealing with on the job. When they're called to break up a fight, or they're called to even something that may seem routine, a loud party and people complaining at 3 in the morning of music being too loud, and then they show up and 3 officers are there and there might be 20 people. And there could be all kinds of substance abuse going on, rowdiness, fighting, and they have to quell that situation. It's extremely stressful. Yes, they're trained, and yes, it's the career that they've chosen, but it's a unique kind of stress, and we've been working with police officers for 30 years. Sadly, there have been too many occasions, in Fall River in particular, but not exclusively, where police officers have lost their lives in the line of duty. And then it becomes very much like the example that Barbara talked about, and anyone in any workplace can relate to that. You lose someone unexpectedly. It has an incredibly traumatic effect on all those involved. So that critical incident stress debriefing, whether it's because of a bank robbery, whether it's because of police officers involved in a critical incident, whether it's a workplace and I can think of one example where somewhat similar to the scenario that Barbara described. It happened to be a local company. A very well-liked employee comes into the office, he's using the copy machine, and he suddenly has a heart attack and dies right there in the office. So not only have people lost a friend and a coworker, but there are some people who actually witnessed his death. So they were, they received kind of a compound trauma in that regard. So we work with companies and organizations around dealing with that. And this is so much a specialty for us that there are organizations that don't use us on a contract basis, but who will call upon us to assist on a case-by-case basis.
That was going to be my question, Mike. If you have a company that doesn't have you as an EAP or an ESP, can they call you directly?
Absolutely.
And so is there a fee associated with that?
That's Don't ask me that. Only because
Probably.
we've got a mission-driven organization who
Yeah, I know.
are more
Yeah.
interested in getting people the help that they need to the
Yeah.
extent that we're able to get that to them, and we don't even think about that.
Okay.
So I can't give you a firm yes or no,
Yeah.
other than to say it depends on, is there extensive follow-up that may be needed? Is there some individual work that may have to
Okay.
happen with some employees who
So
are...
they don't have to have a contract with you in order for you to come in
No.
and help? Okay.
No, some of the more severe examples of the critical incident response that we've done have been with companies that we don't regularly contract with.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, one quick story, after 9/11 occurred, the New York City Police Department has an organization that's composed of current and retired police officers. And it's, the acronym for it is POPPA, P-O-P-P-A, Police Officers Providing Peer Assistance. And that organization reached out after 9/11 occurred to police departments all throughout the country to provide some assistance in doing critical incident stress debriefing for officers. They wanted every officer who was a first responder at 9/11 to be seen at least once. So they called, among others, Providence PD, who said to them, the head of their stress unit in Providence said, we'd like to bring Fall River, Massachusetts PD. They work with a local nonprofit social service organization. They've been doing this longer than us, and they do it better than us, his words. So as a result, which was very kind of him to say, so myself and a group of our officers and a couple of other staff from my agency went to New York City in November and then again in December of 2001 to debrief officers, many of whom had not spoken a word about their experiences to anyone, including their family. Imagine experiencing, literally pulling people out of the rubble, going to the Staten Island landfill where they were trucking debris from ground zero there. That was also a crime scene, and looking at conveyor belts where debris would go by, including a glove with a hand in it, or other kinds of things. These guys were working around the clock, they were exhausted, and when they got home, they just shut down. So, because I said to myself on the drive over there that morning, what are these people going to talk about that they haven't already said 1,000 times to other people? And I can tell you it was alarming to hear how many of these officers that we sat with and conducted groups just like we do in Fall River when we have officers that are mandated to come because of a traumatic experience. And to hear them say, I haven't spoken to anybody about this. They gave us a tour of Ground Zero. They had just constructed the first viewing platform of Ground Zero that was made accessible to family members of victims only. And they took us there, and they took us onto the grounds itself, telling us, don't touch anything, don't pick anything up, but you've got to see the footprint of the World Trade Center to get a sense of what the people who you're going to be interviewing over the next 4 days experience. So needless to say, it was a pretty rewarding experience to be a part of, tragic though it was. And it really helped us a lot to sort of stylize our critical incident response to the people back home, whether it's our own police officers or the victims of a bank robbery. So that's why I said, Angie, it's the component of our program that we want to use the least.
Yeah,
because
of course.
when we're called in to do that,
Yeah.
there's been something terribly wrong that's occurred.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the goal is to get people back to work. The goal of the counseling piece of our service is to get people back to work, to get them, and believe it or not, most of the people who, because there's always a question about confidentiality. You know, if Mike, if your agency has a contract with my company and I utilize your service, I make a call for counseling, or I need to talk to someone to get some information and referral, is that going to be reported back to management? And the answer is no. Most people self-refer. Barbara will tell you there are times when she's called me and said, I have an employee who's going through some personal issues, and it's affected their work performance. I'm kind of summarizing, you know, and we've talked about it, and we'd like to have them come and consider counseling. In that instance, management, if you will, the Human Resource Office will know about it, but most of the people that come to see us are employees who self-refer because they've seen a flyer on the wall in the break room when they know they see our number.
Can they be mandated to go, or is that against the law?
We can't force anybody to go.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, we suggest it. We think it might be helpful. We have this
Yeah.
program in place.
Well, I
and-
think about the substance abuse factor and how that would work, and,
When we had our EAP, it was mandated, it was part of our disciplinary program.
Okay.
So if somebody had a substance abuse or something, we would mandate that they go and see the EAP people as part of their
okay.
discipline.
It does vary from organization to organization, and sometimes they'll call me and say, can I make them go? And I say, well, let me answer you this way. If you have a person who you think has exhausted all other opportunities and their work performance is such that I'm your last call before you make some other decision with regard to their future with you, I think that decision kind of makes itself. But it's certainly not ours to make. So I know what you're saying, Barbara. You can't make them go, but if you say, you know, you need to do something to get
Right,
yourself
yeah.
some help,
Yep.
chances are they're going
Mhm.
to make the right decision on that. So that I'm sorry to be so long-winded, but that's
No,
our.
you're good. Siri said you're good.
I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about, as I say, there are other employee assistance programs that you contact them and they simply do a little triage as to what that employee might need, and then they sort of go through very quickly. Having an onboard behavioral health clinic within our organization, and by the way, if the employee's issue is, I've got an elderly parent that is declining in health and I don't know what to do with them and I'm getting calls all the time at work, well, we have 3 adult day health programs that we might be able to refer them into, that, you know, being a comprehensive social service agency, or it might be, I need daycare for my kid, you know, and all right, we might be able to help with that as well. And that's one of the benefits of having a comprehensive agency that provides, you know, a variety of services. Or somebody calls and says, I need fuel assistance. Well, we don't do that, but you know what? We know who does. And we'll try to connect the dots and be an advocate for you.
So you're specific to the Southcoast, Bristol County, or do you go outside of that?
What we do, I'll answer this way. One of our client companies is a municipality. It's the town of Portsmouth, Rhode Island. So we serve town employees there. Out in the New Bedford area, and it's not a secret. I mean, as I said, we only have about a dozen contracts at the present time. Enos Home Oxygen and Medical Supply are located up in Welby Park, up in the north end of New Bedford. We provide some help to them. So I have a couple of handouts which sort of summarize the components of the program that I described, and a little bit about critical incident debriefing,
Yeah, I think it was.
which, and then there's a list of the current menu of trainings that we provide, although it's interesting because we try to customize that, as I've said, depending upon what the needs are of the companies that call upon us. For example, there's a social service agency we work with who they want us to develop a compassion fatigue training.
Compassion fatigue?
Are you familiar with that?
No.
I should imagine nurses.
Sorry, I know, but I don't want to assume anything.
No.
This is all new to me. I mean, I know EAPs, but I never really,
Well, the compassion
never really
fatigue
used one.
issue is for people who are in the helping professions, nurses, social workers,
Okay.
teachers, and dealing with the burnout, dealing with being a problem solver or a care provider for others can make you neglect self-care.
Do hospitals or say whatever type of worksite that employs that population, do they automatically do that or they don't? Or is it just or is it something that is only through an EAP?
Well, some do it better than others. I mean, I'm thinking
Get a
of
committee.
Charlton.
What do you,
Southcoast had a compassion fatigue committee that was started,
nice.
so.
A lot of folks call upon us to do sexual harassment prevention training. So there are some organizations that think of me as the bank robbery guy and the sexual harassment guy.
I don't know
Jeez,
about bank robbery guy.
Look out.
But if you look at it from, I mean, let's put the human aspect of it aside for a moment. Let's look at the cost savings involved. Yeah, I mean, if you make available, for example, professional counseling, what is the percentage of people that will take advantage of that and will follow through on it? Let alone the number of people who need it. Then there's a smaller percentage of those who will take advantage. But, you know, I'm looking at my HR friend over here. Let's say you have somebody with some issues in their life that is impeding their ability to work productively. Over time, how costly is that to the company when you can, and again, I'm only looking at dollars and cents. If you, look at it in terms of poor work performance, suspensions, terminations, hiring a new person, interviewing people, advertising, filling and training a new person in that job. If you can provide a safety net, and again, it's not always going to be successful. It's not going to save every job and turn an unproductive individual into your best employee. But if you can do that, and in the course of that, have that safety net because an employer says, oh, I don't want to get involved in their personal problems, I just want to make sure there's somebody else there who can. Then if a tiny percentage of your employees utilize it, but they get some help that is going to save the organization some real dollars in the long run, then it's a worthwhile investment. There are some employee assistance programs that will sort of triage the issue, and that's the service they provide. That's what you end up paying for. And if someone needs ongoing counseling, they'll call a provider like Family Service Association with a referral. So now insurance starts to take over paying, you know, the insurance benefits of the employee start to pay for the counseling with whatever applicable deductible and co-payment is determined by their insurance provider. What we do, if there's a need for therapy, we bring them in and we do bill their insurance from the very first visit. But because we've got these other various components, some companies take advantage of some rather than others. And in a way, it's sort of like an insurance company, insurance policy. That's what you're paying for, is that it's there if you need it. But there are those employee assistance programs, and how do you find them? You go to your insurance card and you look at the 800 number in the back, and you're talking to somebody in Wisconsin who said, oh yeah, we'll take care of that, and they're going to call us.
Ridiculous.
Because then they have to
Or
start
some
all
other
over. They
provider
set
that's
up with somebody and
then they
started
have to start
opening
up.
up the problem, and then they're like, now go find someone on your own. So it doesn't
Well,
work.
and from a clinical standpoint, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because if you see someone a handful of times, and then you start to develop a relationship between a therapist and that individual, and then they're going to go after 3 sessions, they're out the door, and they're going to see somebody else and start the process over from scratch. So, in a
It's
way,
tough
that's
enough to
one
do
of the...
that first session, you know?
Yeah.
So that's something that you would provide continued after whatever the EAP program covers as part of our contract.
Right, but you're not paying for the counseling. Insurance companies are frowned upon, and there was a time when we used to offer a tiered package where we would have a limited number of free sessions.
And that's what we had
2.
previously, right?
But insurance companies don't like that to be done any longer. They don't like an organization to give away what they are then end up paying for.
I knew like this much about the AP through Sue, and now I know like a lot more. So